Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Improv Town. I am Clayton Mashad, and this is a Miniscode. So, during my interview with Kate and Casey, founders of Wage House Improv Theater, I was interviewing them about starting a theater, but they do a two-person improv show, and I'm obsessed with two-person improv, so we went off on that topic for a while, and I wanted to keep the original episode pretty on topic about starting a theater. But I thought what they had to say about doing two-person improv was great, so I just cut it out and decided to make this minisode. I hope you enjoy it, and as always, rate and review this podcast. So, like, the general topic I want to talk about is, like, starting a theater and that type of stuff, but I'm super interested in two-person improv. So before we talk about that, I want to talk about doing two-person improv, because I feel like that is a whole different level or set of skills than a larger ensemble, both in terms of, like, editing, because you have to edit within the scenes. So many, I don't know. It's so true. I saw Susan Messing and Rachel Mason were at PIF, not this year, but the year before. And it was just like, holy effing shit. Like, how do two people just they just turn away for 1 second and they, like, know that that's a whole white, like, everything about it was just like, oh, that is so cool. That's what I want to do. And then did it once with Tim Mahoney. I think you guys know Tim Mahoney, right?
Yep.
Him and I did one at the CTC, and it was like, it just evolved into, I don't know. It wasn't what I was hoping for. And then Alyssa and I just did a two-person Herald a few weeks ago, and that one was actually
that's cool.
It was actually really cool, and it wasn't that one was.
How do you remember? Did you remember all of the stuff?
Yeah, actually, I think that it was a super weird experience. I think that the best way to actually get good at the Herald would be to practice it as a two-person one, because it forces you to have to do everything, and it forces you to have to remember the beats. So, like, you know, sometimes it's just easy to, like, get distracted. You know, I don't even necessarily know the premise of the scene I was just in before it got wiped. So, you know, what the game of it is. So, like, I guess someone, like, they wiped it, and I still don't really know what we were doing, so I guess someone else is going to have to start that second beat, because I don't actually know what we got when you wiped us. And, like, you know, and you can be like, oh, I pulled one good premise from that opening, and there's 5 of us, so, like, so if each person pulls one, even if some of them overlap. But when it's just 2 people, you have to just do all the work by yourself. So it like, I don't know, it's like a super good just training technique, even if, like, the heralds aren't as good as they would be with a larger ensemble.
Like more brains.
Just as far as, like, reinforcing and making you have to do all the heavy lifting.
So I think for me, I always like to take the intimidation factor out for folks right away. So for me, it's less cooks in the kitchen. So you're dealing with less people's ideas when you're just doing a duo or a trio, but a duo specifically is what we're talking about. But there's less people to get on board with, group mind wise, and you're not dealing with different people's edits in weird ways that you weren't maybe seeing in your own brain. So I think right away there's a lot that makes it easier to do. So I always want to encourage people, like, don't let this scare you. Like, go ahead and get in there.
Because improvising with one person who you're super comfortable with is way easier than improvising with 5 people you're semi-comfortable with.
Absolutely. It's super intimate. So you are familiarizing yourself with that other person's choices, that other person's style, and that can be really comforting, because you're like, oh, I know you, I know the way you play. And then you start to develop the shorthand between you two, where it's like, oh, I know exactly when you are switching character, I know when you're editing, I know when you're doing whatever move you're doing. I also think you mentioned, like, the Herald being more successful for you than the other one, and I'm not sure what the other form was that you were doing, but form, I think, is super helpful when it comes to two-person improv, whether that is a form you created yourself that you just found together, which is sort of what Casey and I did, or you're doing a specific form that you already know about and have familiarized yourself with. I think that gives you a place to hang your coat and sort of say, we know the roadmap, we know where we're going, so we just have to go there together and find all the fun on the way. But it allows you to see your way through it instead of sort of saying like, oh man, are we going to be able to get through an hour, just the two of us? What if our scene, is confusing at the top and we don't know where to go from there? It's like, no, you know where to go. You have a form to follow.
Ooh, yeah, that's a super interesting point. So, not the last interview I did, but the last one that got put up is my one with Tim Thibodeau, where we talk about forms. And so it's super interesting to hear the kind of you talk about how the importance of a form is different when you're doing a two-person show. How you feel it's more important than when you're...
I enjoy it. I don't know if it's more important, but for me, it gives me a place to hang my coat. Like I feel as though I have a blueprint that helps me guide myself as a player through that hour.
So you guys said you kind of created your own form. So how would do you have a name for your form, and how would you describe it? The Kate and Casey form?
I guess so.
Yeah.
The Kate and Casey form. We really like to start with what becomes the source scene at the top of the shows, which is a really patient, slower two-person scene that we really try to dive into the relationship and find some patterns and make it a really, really clear world in all the aspects. And then we try to have a lot of more just like fun, one-off, gamier scenes in the middle. So it's kind of like we start off really patient and then we tap into that other side of ourselves, which is like crazy, kooky, like shoot out of a cannon. We try to do a run of that. And then when we kind of need a break, we go back to those characters we created in that nice, slow, vivid environment. And we continue to flesh them out. And we have 3 beats of that source scene. And in between, we just kind of have that more of a fast-paced, fun, one-off things.
And you're not playing those same characters that are in those source scenes.
Right.
You're doing
completely different.
Premise stuff inspired by what happens in those scenes, or anything.
It can really be anything. It can be like game, theme. It's really like one of the things I've attached myself to is the rhythm of the show. It has a really fun rhythm because we're like slow, fast. And in those fast scenes, anything is game. You can just pull a one-word detail. You can pull...
right, the person said cowboy boots in that first scene. Now let's do something about cowboy boots or whatever.
Exactly. It really, everything is open and on the table. Mm-hmm. We can just scene paint each other. It doesn't,
We just more have the understanding, like, dive right in, because this isn't going to be like that long, like, meandering, we'll justify it as we go scene. It's more just jump in, make some choices, play those choices, have fun, and then jump to the next one. And
how do you wipe your two-person scenes?
We clap at it within the scene.
Okay. So
I think eventually we'll like. There's some groups and some duos who do really nice, like just very fluid, organic, transitional edits. Like TJ and Dave are very fluid. Orange Tuxedo, Carla and Craig Kukowski, like they're very fluid. And I think eventually we'll work towards that. But just to kind of make it clear to the audience and to ourselves, we'll do a clap edit and then kind of clear the stage.
And then, so then what if you were going to do a tag out? Do you just do a tag and then they know that?
Yeah, we definitely tag out in the show. And we also swap characters. So sometimes we tag each other out so that the other person can go be the...
Oh, yeah.
That's like, I'll become Kate's character.
Right.
So she can walk on as a different character. So I think we have a good shorthand with each other. Whereas, like, if we're in a scene and she just kind of makes a sudden movement, I just kind of, from reading the scene, I'll know like, oh, she's going to be that character we just mentioned walking on. And so I can decide whether to stay my character or become her original character. Whatever's best serving kind of like the game of the scene and the funny of the scene. Like, why is she making that choice and who does she need me to be? And then just stepping into that role.
I want to talk so much just about two-person improv.
Yeah, I mean, it's really cool. It's really cool to see. Obviously, like TJ and Dave are super strong at it, and Orange Tuxedo is amazing. There's a lot of really great duos out there, and like I just started doing a duo with my husband, and it's just such a cool thing. Like you get to make so many choices about the form, and then you get to make so many choices within that form. So it's for some people very intimidating, and you think it would be more cumbersome and like more on your shoulders going into it, but it's really like fun.
Yeah, that's I can't remember. I don't think it's Colbert. I think maybe it was why can't I think of his name? But like that more restrictions can actually lead to more creativity by having or more structure can actually lead to being more productive.
I strongly believe that.
More creative.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
I definitely agree with that. Some people are like, get this form off of me, man. Don't put any forms on me, man. I don't know who I'm impersonating right now. But like people are like sometimes you'll meet those improvisers who's like, I don't want like, or you'll be like, hey everybody, we're doing Heralds. And then there'll be like that one person who will do like a group game and right in the beginning, and you're like, hey, what happened to the Herald? And they're just like, I just thought I'd forget the Herald, right? And we're like, no, we all agreed.
In my mind, I actually have a specific person who you are
Oh,
doing,
no, I'm not.
but I'm not going.
I'm not impersonating them. I have no
to-
idea who I'm
not going
impersonating.
to say.
All characters in this podcast are fictional.
Thank you. Thank you for that disclaimer, because that's totally what it is. But yeah, I think there's some people who just would rather do like a loose montage, but I agree with both of you. A structure and a form can really take away a lot of the guesswork as to like what choice is this person making and why.
Right, yeah. Yeah, especially something like the Herald, where you obviously know, like, oh, this is the second beat of this other thing. Yeah, that was the other thing that was interesting about doing, Melissa and I were doing the two-person Herald. So like I was saying, that sometimes you'll be in a source scene, and a lot of the time, especially if you only have like a 15-minute set or something, you'll try to keep those source scenes really short. So sometimes they will get wiped before you yourself, like... thought that there was a game or thought that there was anything.
Is that how long you had to do the two-person Herald?
Yeah, because it was our
15-minute set.
I think we had like 10 minutes.
What?
But we did it in seven scenes. We did no opening, no group scenes, and just and third beat one scene. So just 7 scenes.
Good for you guys.
And it was weird. It was not like, it was definitely not the funniest, but it was the tech. And not that like technically correct.
Yeah, you guys put your heads down. You're like, we're doing this form.
That's not what you're not aiming, because like, who cares if you?
We're not gonna get to 2B and get the lights turned off on.
Yeah,
us.
like who cares if you do a perfect Herald as long as you do a funny, entertaining show, right? But it was still like, oh, this is like the first time they were ever like, well, we only have this much time. This is the 7th scene. That's all we're gonna have time for. We just have to make all 3 of these scenes combined in this one scene. And even that same thing, like, just with that restriction, it's like, well, this just has to happen. Yes. But the other thing I was going to say, so about getting wiped, in the source scene before you know what's going on, when you're just doing it with 2 people, either you end the scene or the other person ends the scene, and so either I end the scene because I know what we're going to do for our next beat, or they've ended the scene because they know what the next beat could be. So there's never that, like, oh crap, what's going to, like, happen next? Because it's like, well, if they edited it, if they wiped A1, then when we come out in B1, I know that they had thought of what the thing should be. Yeah. And that's like another thing that was just like, well, you never have that stress of like having to sit on the sidelines and be like, what is a good next beat for that? What was the game of that scene actually about? And it's like, either I wiped it because I knew it, or they wiped it because they knew it. And when we go back out, either one of us is going to have that thing. And so, because that's the other thing about the Herald, or any form, is that it can put you in your head on the sidelines being like, oh, what should I do later? Right. Whereas if it is just 2 people, you can never do that because you're never on the sidelines. Mm-hmm. Right. So that you can never not be in the scene.
Which is awesome.
Right.
Which
from lots of perspectives.
Absolutely. You're not sitting there being nervous. You're not sitting there thinking. You're just moving forward and having fun in the moment, as you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah. So, everyone, you should do two-person improv.
Yeah.
Do it.
I still have more questions about two-person improv. Do you guys ever do ghost characters? So, like,
Yeah.
One
of us is dead and a ghost?
No.
We do a lot of
I was
no.
like,
I mean, like-
absolutely, every show, every single show.
I guess I should explain, both just for the audience. Like ghost, by which I mean in baseball, how you'd be like ghost man on second, which TJ and Dave do a lot. So say you're doing a 2-character scene, and then you're like, oh shit, the boss is coming, and Kate leaves and enters as the boss.
Absolutely.
So there's a third character, or Kate's original character who is there,
Yeah.
but is now invisible.
Yeah.
And so then like having conversations, like turning back to that character and being like, I think she heard us, and then like having a
Yeah.
And we just had a year anniversary here at the theater. And woohoo! And so to celebrate that as our show, we put together a compilation of, because we did the first 8 weeks at Wage House. So every Friday, the first 8 weeks, was it?
Yes.
We did Kate and Casey. So we went back and had an awesome time watching all the footage from that.
No.
No.
She says awesome.
Yeah, it was terrible.
It was horrifying.
And upsetting.
We skipped
and
through
boring
it.
and scary.
It wasn't upsetting.
Yeah.
It was cringy.
Cringy.
Sometimes cringy. Sometimes, I mean, watching yourself back at tape, like you're like, oh God, we should fast forward through the scene because it's going to be bad. And then we don't fast forward. We're like, oh, it wasn't that bad.
Yeah.
So it's good in that way, but just to kind of see sometimes when you make a bad choice, that's cringy.
Yeah. So we put together like a best of. So we took all those improv scenes that we liked, punched them up, strung them together in a good
video,
way.
or you recreated them?
Recreated them. And then did that as our year
Kind of like a
anniversary
sketch
show.
show.
Exactly.
Like a
so
review.
improv to sketch, really.
Yeah.
But it was pretty close to what we had originally created in those original improv scenes.
We had one scene, we had one thread where it was, when we originally performed it, it was a book club. So it was the two of us on stage, but we had 4 characters on stage.
Yeah.
So is that the scene you were talking about?
Absolutely. But
Okay.
there were so many times where we were like, do we need that 6th character that we created in this scene to make it funny? Like, there were so many moments where we had multiple characters going. We do a ton of that, is my point. And so we were like trying to navigate, and in the book club scene, we kept all 4 characters when we brought it back and just bopped between them.
Yeah. I think stage picture is a huge factor in ghost characters, as you say.
Yeah, I don't know if I coined that.
I like it.
Yeah, I don't know where I came up with it.
If you remember who came up with it, credit them when you remember. But for now,
I think I came up with it. I think I deserve the credit.
I like it.
I think I stole it
Ghostman.
from when you play baseball as a kid.
Yeah,
Like,
Ghostman.
Ghostman was
Yeah.
first.
Exactly. Yeah. No, that's a fun thing to be able to do. In just having more options. And you're right, TJ and Dave do an awesome
Yeah, that was
job
like,
of that.
I mean, obviously when you see TJ and Dave, there's so many things that friggin' blow your
And
mind.
we could
like,
just talk about TJ and Dave for
I could
4 hours.
I could just do an entire hour-long episode of just me talking to people about how...
Not actually TJ and Dave you're talking
just-
to, but just like people about.
This is an episode about TJ and Dave. Yeah. And
I'll
so
be
much
on
of
that
the
episode.
questions I would have about two-person improv are like inspired by stuff that's like seeing them and then being like, I didn't think that was possible. Or not possible, but like I never would have thought to do that in a million years.
Yeah.
So, and then you guys said you switch characters, like you'll switch roles and stuff. Because that's the other super sweet thing. Like it'll be 3 characters, and one person will leave, become a ghost character. Then the other person will step in and become the ghost character. So now they're playing the other person's character, and then the person will leave, say, as the boss in that example, and then take up the other person's. And it's like, oh,
Yeah, and
that's so much fun.
sometimes it works. Sometimes it doesn't. I think the times it doesn't is when like that third character could exist in a scene without you like becoming that character, or somebody jumps into that into playing that character before the two other people have clearly defined it. So for example, like I think, so if it was like coworkers and they were talking about their boss and they didn't really have a lot fleshed out about the boss, but then they established that the boss entered and somebody jumped into the boss and started talking as the boss, like unless it might be a little clunkier without the boss more clearly defined.
Yeah, so don't,
if that makes sense.
Yeah, don't force it just because it's cool.
We're talking about like improv is an imaginary world, and then we're also talking about like the deeper imaginary world of ghost characters.
That's what this podcast is all about. The imaginary
the deep imagination.
Inside baseball.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, you learn through doing like, hey, we can have as many characters as we want on stage, but don't always feel the need to like become those characters right away. Only become those characters in the flesh if it's needed and necessary.
Good advice. So it's super cool, but don't force it.
Yeah. I mean, if you're in a duo and you call attention to a third character, don't feel the pressure to immediately jump into that character. You can totally like reference and talk to that character in its invisible form.
Yeah, both of those two ideas about the waiting till this ghost character, quote unquote, is fleshed out, and then also the switching of the characters that each other are playing remind me of like the character circle exercise, right? So whatever, the circle A, B, C, D, and then character A creates a character, or everyone says something about the character, then the person does the character, and then person B does the character. And so like the funniest thing about that is, it has to do with both of those, I guess, which is like, it's funnier to see someone play a character that they're not, it's definitely not that they're pimped into, but when you've already given all the crazy, like, oh yeah, I know, that French accent of his is insane. And like, what about his peg leg? And like, why does he always like talk to his invisible dog? And whatever, just building up all this, like, then it's way funnier for someone to be like, well, now I guess I'm gonna go play that insane French accent, peg leg, invisible dog talker, rather than if it was like the boss came in and then you just went up and started like doing that.
Exactly that.
We celebrate, I think for me, like one of the ways I look at it is we celebrate recognizability and clarity. So in improv, you look like a rock star when you make each other make sense, and when you do something that you fulfill that promise that you've made. So if someone starts describing another character and they say, oh, they're very, clumsy, and they talk really philosophically, and while they're bumping into everything, and then someone comes in and delivers exactly on that promise, we love it, and we love them for fulfilling that promise. And just like when we start a scene and we say, Henderson, get in here, and someone comes in and is like, I'm so sorry, boss. We are like, yay!
Right.
You fulfilled the promise of what you were describing on stage. Instead of inventing this thing that didn't need to be there or that was never described or expected. We think we all need to be super creative in improv when really we just need to fulfill the promise of recognizability in what we're creating.
Yeah, that's great advice. Right, it's always like make bold choices, that's fine.
Yeah.
Good advice. But should not be like supplanted by the idea of yes-anding. Right, as opposed to just and, as opposed, like and versus yes and then I'm gonna do that thing and then add a little more detail to it. Like, just being like, oh, here's the boss, and then just being like, I don't know, just adding coming out of some crazy character that no one ever talked about and no one ever
exactly. Yeah, it's like, oh, do we need this other thing? And if we do, we better understand it. And if we do understand it, then we can play it and we can bring them in and incorporate them into the quilt that we're already making. But if someone just walks in and is the crazy thing, We're like, great, we didn't need you and we don't know why you're here, and now we got to do a whole lot of work to
Chris
understand.
Farley just walks into the scene.
Oh, Chris Farley. He can do no wrong.
He's the exception.
He's
to
the
rule.
exception.
I was listening to this interview with Sharna, and she was trying to help her, and she was talking about you know, all like the early IO stuff, and just started talking about Chris Farley, like almost teared up, just literally being like, oh, I let him stay at my house with like, it's like her and Dell took him out and tried to give him like lessons on how to be like a more like, not gentlemanly, like what's the word that I'm like,
Refined.
refined, and like fall out of it. I was just like, I almost cried so many times listening to that interview. It's on the Meet podcast, which is normally performing improv, but they just did an interview with Sharna.
Oh.
And it was like, it's great. It was super, just like listening to her basically like picking up all of these. This is a total digression, but like just helping out and like, I don't know, she's obviously incredible. She gets a lot of credit, but I still don't think she gets the credit that she deserves for being the godmother of improv in America. You've been listening to Improv Town. If you enjoyed this episode, rate and review us wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you're in the Rhode Island area, don't forget to check out all the great local improv. PIG, the Providence Improv Guild, has shows every Thursday, Friday, and Saturday at 8. The Contemporary Theater down in Wakefield is currently doing Maestro Improv at 9:30 on Fridays, and the Bit Players do Short Form down in Newport every Friday and Saturday night at the Firehouse Theater, and that's BYOB, so that's always fun. You can also check out Improv Jones, Rhode Island's longest-running improv show, on the first Saturday of every month. That's down at the AS220 Black Box in Providence. Last but not least, there's a new improv theater in town, Wage House, which has shows every Friday night at 8 in Pawtucket. And many of these theaters also offer great improv classes, so don't forget to check those out as well. I'm sure Google can help you find everything you need. See you next time.